Hey everybody, this is Joel. I'm down at Boom Comics in Topeka, and this is the introduction to the Primer, which is the first of the 4 eras in Dryden's sci-fi universe. So if you've watched the introduction video to the science fiction universe, you're aware that we break our universe up as we go forward in the future based roughly on genres. We like to be accessible to a lot of different genres of science fiction, and so we build our universe with that sort of flexibility. In the very first period, the first 600 years or so into the future is pretty hard science fiction. We're not exactly a Discovery Channel documentary or anything, but this is going to be the most like the real world. The Primer starts with technologies today and then moves into the fantastic future. So this is the introduction to how to write and how to get oriented in the Primer if you're interested in the more hard science fiction. So what we're looking for here is we're looking for stuff that would fit in Arthur C. Clarke. We're looking for stuff that would be cyberpunk. We're looking for cyber noir. We're looking for things that are more contemporary science fiction. It's a really big universe, and at this point the Primer is really pretty well developed, and I'm not going to try to give you the full introduction to the whole thing because it's bigger than I could ever describe. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the technologies, and then I'm going to give you examples of some of the places that have been developed in the universe, some of the things that have been done in the Primer, and then I'm going to give you the link, of course, to the WordPress blog and to the Dryden author and artist page where you can go to learn a lot more about how the Primer works. All right, so as we go forward in time, there are a series of wars coming within the next century or so that are sometimes referred to as the Extinction Wars. They happen here on Earth, and they're the resource wars that a lot of people predict will come. At that point, if you were interested in writing in those environments, the technology is fairly close to our technology, except, of course, stealthier and higher techier as we go further and further into the future. But within about 100 or 200 years, we developed the technology called the framing technology, the framing drive technology. And what framing drive technology does is it takes advantage of the There's Matt, the owner of Boom Comics, guest starring in today's video. Thanks, Matt. Glad to see you. And what framing technology does is the expansion that drove the original development of the universe actually happened faster than the speed of light. It's called inflation, and it's the unfolding of the universe itself, and that left ripples that continue to move around our universe at faster than the speed of light. And framing technology grabs a hold of that and rides that ripple. And so you're able to move just in 2 or 3 light-minute jumps. But you appear to move much faster than the speed of light because you're actually stepping onto one side of a ripple and off of the other side of it. And you're limited in terms of the maximum distance that you could travel because the ripples are naturally curved, and before you travel very far, you appear to start to spiral. So you jump a couple of light minutes, and then you have to get off of it and grab another one and jump a couple of light minutes. Well, this opens up humans to the ability to travel across star systems. And this largely gets driven, the whole history is, of course, available on the blog and the author and artist page, but this is largely driven by corporate interests. And so you develop a culture that is very, very driven. There are several large, 3 major and then dozens of minor corporations out there in human space in the Primer, and we get a lot of assassinations and corporate battles and entire planets that are mining colonies owned by corporations that are basically slave worlds. And this allows for a lot of stainless steel rat and that kind of stuff to go on. But also within that, there's some other things that are going on. There's a group out there that is called the League of Nations, and they own a planet called League Prime, and they're very sort of scientific. They're very UN. They want to have a sort of a civilized response to the colonization of planets. They're interested in ecological issues, and they serve as a sort of a counterpoint to the just rampant corporate greed. There's also a society that was designed by Charlotte Garnier called Il Solitaire, and what happens with the Il Solitaire is that the cetaceans realize that cetaceans being aquatic mammals, whales, dolphins, porpoises, realize that they're just not going to survive for very much longer on the Earth because of the damage to the ecosystem, and they approach the University of Antarctica in the fairly near future, far enough in the future that the University of Antarctica has been developed, And they set up a research facility in Lake Vostok, which is an under ice lake that actually exists in Antarctica. And they began hybridizing humans and cetaceans and other species, and they build their own society that is not human and is not really whale. It's a unique species unto itself, a unique invention. It's not even a single species. They leave, literally. Gavin Revitt has drawn the spaceship. The Lake Vostok station lifts into space and takes off and is just gone. And they move sort of towards galactic center. And begin sort of this Jacques Cousteau exploration type species that lives mostly for scientific inquiry and is very mysterious. There's also an alien species that gets encountered. Dan Hunt has written about it in his book, Song of Distant Stars. They're off to what would be the west. If you were looking, I'm sorry, I have to think this through now. If you're looking at galactic center, they're off to our right. How's that? And we've just had a couple of light contacts with them. They're smaller than humans, but technologically very similar, and they are a bipedal life form. And not a lot is understood about them, but they're out there also. And then, of course, as soon as framing technology is invented, people with their own political agendas, religious agendas, spirit of adventures have been taking off into space, leaving human space. And so the sort of standard date for the primer is the year 2503. The primer actually lasts until 2600, which I'll describe here in a few minutes. But at Galactic Standard Time, or Earth Standard Time, whatever you want to call it, for the primer is 2503. And in the year 2503, we have about 300 light years long and about 100 light years wide, sort of a tube running along our spiral arm of the galaxy that is sort of the main run. It gets referred to as the main run. And these are planets that have been colonized for 100 years or more. They're well established. They have their own cultures. There are dozens of them. You can find the list out on the author and artist page or on the blog. And that list is growing just almost literally by the day at this point. And they're well known, they're well established planets. And then we have this sort of nebulous fringe that exists outside of that, of these planets, some of which have had no contact with Earth since they left, some of which are completely despotic little dictatorships, and some of which are Ileitic little paradises, and they're all functioning on their own out there. And that's what the universe looks like in the primer. Now, the primer comes to an end sort of suddenly. One of the corporations, two things happen. One of the corporations that is the youngest and most aggressive is called CERT Corp, and they are roughly in the same direction as the Cetaceans. They're sort of towards galactic center, and they are extremely aggressive, extremely exploitative. They like to destroy ecosystems, strip entire planets. They're trying to build a disk world, and they're just stripping entire other planets in order to try to work the project. And eventually the Ilsoltaire get very concerned about this. And while the Ilsoltaire by themselves entirely passive, they're technologically in a lot of ways superior to humans. They can actually communicate faster than the light by using their framing drives to send ripples out. They sing as whales sing, except they do it right in the ether of space. Humans don't have that technology. Humans continue to be limited to faster than light technology. They use communication ponies, which are little tiny framing drive ships to send messages back and forth. And so the Ilsoltaire sort of interrupt human expansion. They use ripplers, which disrupt faster than light travel and other technologies to sort of shut humans down. They don't really exterminate them, but they take control of space around their section of human space. And at the same time, the Europan, which is the entity that lives on the bottom of the ocean on Jupiter's moon Europa, decides that it's had enough of humans, and it builds biological ships and weapons and organic creatures to fight the humans. And just one day, right in the middle of the Sol system in the year 2600, the Europan just erupts and starts taking over star systems. And so very quickly humans fall from the control of the center, but that's not the end of the story, of course. What that begins then is the era of the Dryden experiment that is less scientific and more space fantasy, called Belle Epoque. And that's the next video, which I'm going to start here in just a minute. So that's the introduction to the primer. Thanks for joining us. I'm here at Boom Comics. Thanks for joining us.